But I'd like us to discuss, the judiciary, the proposals on the judiciary, the Ombudsman in there, and that is also causing quite a bit of conversation. Let's listen to ANC party leader Musalia Mudavadi on the Senate and the judiciary, and then we'll listen to the Deputy President as well.
Senate is the anchor to devolution. I think that requires a review, not a rejection of the document, but a review. Your Excellency, the judiciary is independent. There's a very good provision recommending the appointment of the Ombudsman to handle the issues of the judiciary. I think that is good. However, I strongly believe that in order to enhance the independence of the judiciary, that appointment should be made by the Chief Justice.
The recommendation that has been made to have an ombudsman appointed by the executive into the judiciary, in my respectful submission, is a derogation from the independence of the judiciary. And we must be careful. We must be careful about the independence of institutions. We are coming from a history where judges received telephone calls, where courts were held at night. We do not want to go there.
And it's important to note that actually the Office of the Judiciary Ombudsman currently exists right now. And I was reading up on it. It's chaired by Ombudsman of the Judiciary. And it's, the office of that. It's headed by the DCJ, receiving and conducting inquiries into the conduct of judicial officers. But here's an interesting thing that some say, that this actually, besides the fact that he or she would be appointed by the president and get to sit in the JSC, is that this would give the executive undue advantage in the Judicial Service Commission, because remember, already the president has 2 representatives whom he nominates and are approved by Parliament, man and a woman. And then there's also, the Attorney General who sits there as a representative. So that would then mean there would be, 3 people that would be holding brief for the executive in there?
The biggest challenge that I see with that recommendation, and it's one of the recommendations that may bring a lot of issues, is every time there's a feeling that the executive wants or is intent on bulldozing the judiciary, there is a concern. Because, truth be told, an independent, well-funded, robust judiciary is a good thing for our country. Why do I say so? Because when citizens have a dispute with the government of the day, they run to the judiciary for arbitration. So you need a judiciary that can be able to correct the government of the day and can also correct the population, the general population as it were. When you have a dispute over a piece of land, let's say with Linas here, the recourse is in the judiciary. If there's a marital dispute at family level, there's a family division of the judiciary. If there is a dispute even over football, and you can't agree among yourselves, you take it to the...
Even of an election.
Even of an election, you take it to the judiciary. So anytime there's a feeling or fear that the judiciary is being overpowered by the government, by way of perception or even in reality, there is a serious concern there. So there's need for a proper discussion about the Office of the Ombudsman as proposed in the BBI report, lest it becomes a scenario where if the executive doesn't like Judge so-and-so, who has made a certain ruling, then somebody can be, and there are litigants for hire in this country, somebody who can be asked to file a petition contesting the conduct of Judge so-and-so, simply because probably ali overlap kwa traffic or something like that, and then you cite integrity issues and so on and so forth. And I don't think it will be possible to investigate a judge while he or she is in office. So if a certain judge is marked by the executive as maybe problematic, hard-headed or anything like that, then this office could easily be used to tame those judges, which is a dangerous thing for our country. Number 2, in line with the question of police. a police council headed by the cabinet minister in charge of national security or interior for that matter is also a problematic area. Why? Because we're coming from a history of police being used to, fight dissent by the executive. So when you have a judiciary that is overpowered by the executive, a police force that is directly controlled by the executive to, push people into a certain line, then you have a dangerous combination. Let's have a scenario where the police can act independently, can be funded, can be enabled to do the following. Number one, enforcement of law, keeping law and order, and protecting people and their property. And in the event of a dispute between citizens and the police, there is an independent body called IPOA, Independent Police Oversighting Authority, that can be able to deal with this. If you were to borrow those examples, then maybe have a scenario where if you have a dispute with a judge or a magistrate, then there is an enabling process where that matter can be sorted out quickly. Obviously, there's a concern that probably currently, if you have a dispute with a judge, you only have to take it to the Judicial Service Commission, and it's a process that probably may take a little long, and maybe the only provided room is for the removal of a judge, which is a very laborious process. Deal with these issues and don't leave room for any doubt or perception of control of key institutions by the executive, because doing so is problematic.
Actually, when you spoke about that, I just wanted to say it needs to be taken in context, particularly with this administration. They have shown time and again a great appetite and greed to control or punish the judiciary whenever they make rulings, that they're not happy with. The executive, led by the president himself, has been very key in ignoring and defying court orders. Not only that, the president has openly declared his unhappiness with the judiciary, the revisit statement. I mean, you can even remember the former majority leader, Aden Duale, on the steps of, was it Parliament? Openly criticizing Justice Odunga when he was making rulings that he was unhappy with. And so all of these things that are happening need to be taken in that context, that there's been a very prickly relationship between this executive, headed by this president, who's driving this process of the BBI, that is itself talking about limiting the role and the work and the functions of the judiciary.
That's true, Yvonne. In fact, an independent judiciary requires political goodwill. If there's no political goodwill, you're not going to have an independent judiciary. And we keep remembering the lone figure of Chief Justice David Maraga, the steps there of the court, complaining not once, not twice, more than that, asking for basic things like funding, and the fact that we need all these courtrooms in these parts of the country. He talked about how hard it is for some people in some parts of the country to get justice because of their facilities are not there. We're still waiting for the judges to be appointed, Paka Saizi. And you talk about that relationship between this executive and the judiciary being very, very Nimbaya. So mzuri at all. And then Gashuri spoke about institutions. He mentioned the police and also IEBC. And I remember when the Deputy President was speaking, he mentioned these three institutions in his submissions. Of course, I wish we had more time to clarify one of the issues he brought about the IEBC. But now, what this brings me to is now, what next? Their journey is towards having a referendum. And Gashuri, you spoke to one of the joint secretaries, Paul Mwangi, during the event at the Bomas, and he said, probably it may happen in February. Now, it will be run by the IEBC. Another issue of cost and fund and how much it will cost has come up now today.
Yeah, 14 billion, 2 billion.
2 billion. The head of the leader of ODM saying it will cost 2 billion. IEBC insisting it will cost 14 billion. Even IEBC releasing a statement trying to explain why it will cost 14 billion, explaining, looking at how much it cost for the 2010 referendum, how much it cost for the 2017 fresh presidential elections, and how much they're thinking it will cost the 2021 proposed referendum, and explaining all this, say it will cost about 13.7 billion shillings. Whether it's 2 billion or 13.7 billion, it's a lot of money. The economy is hurting as it is, and that's a lot of money to be spending. But now that's another push and pull you expected to see in the days to come about how much will the referendum cost as a country.
Indeed. Linus?
You see, Yvonne, there'll be a legitimate question among progressives in this country. And the legitimate question will be, what are the revisit clauses in this BBI report? Is Ombudsman, the introduction of an Ombudsman, a revisit clause? Because every weakness, every loophole in this BBI report will be reduced to the Uhuru Kenyatta Raila Odinga handshake. It's a deal between two persons, which is what makes BBI as a constitutional review process a weak document. A weak document because, first of all, it is seeking to introduce very major changes on a document that took so long to put together. The Constitution of Kenya 2010 is one of the most thorough constitutions written in Africa anywhere. It is the work of a lot of people, from activists to intellectuals to politicians. There cannot be any so broad-minded kind of document that has been put together in terms of the legal framework that guides this country than the Constitution of Kenya 2010. What do we expect going forward? We expect going forward progressives to come in very strongly for the protection of the very things they fought to have in their constitution, and that is independence of certain institutions. One of them, judiciary. Some of them spoke of the Independent Electoral Commission, and they even added the word independent. The police, the intention of having the National Police Service Commission was to basically introduce certain levels of accountability in the police service.
Decentralize it.
Yeah, decentralize it a bit. Make them answerable to a force other than the person they take orders from, and that is the Minister for Interior. Now, Francis, the proposal to have a police council headed by
the cabinet minister.
The cabinet minister in charge of Interior. How different will be the meetings of the Kenya Police Council from those of the Ministry of Interior? What is the difference between the meetings of those institutions? Because at the head of the table in Harambee House, in the Ministry of Interior, will be the minister in charge of Interior.
Yeah.
So he moves to, I don't know, maybe Westlands. They like looking for fancy places for commissions and councils, and then heads a meeting of the same people he was meeting in Harambee House.
Yeah.
That is ridiculous. There are things that will annoy a lot of the progressives that concentrated a lot and put a lot of energy in writing this constitution.
Yeah.
And they include the late Nzamba Kitonga.
Yeah.
I know it's been reported that he supported the views of the BBI. Nzamba Kitonga was part of the process that came up with the Bomas draft, the harmonized draft. The harmonized draft sought to decentralize power in terms of the executive. And I think, may his soul rest in peace, he was referring specifically to the need to demystify the presidency. He is not around for us to actually question, but there are a lot of other progressives, the likes of Willie Mutunga. I would love to hear what they think about the introduction of the Ombudsman, the introduction of the Kenya Police Council. Now, at the political level, a lot of people would find it really odd that at the Bomas Forum on the issue of institutions, it is Deputy William Ruto and not Raila Odinga who fought for a lot of the clauses that we have today in the Constitution of Kenya 2010, that is the voice of, or rather progressive voice, on the floor of Bomas. But that was only the first episode. Maybe there's a lot that we're going to see, and switching of places between progressives and non-progressives in terms of what constitutional order we should have.
Two quick things, Yvonne, as we wind up. The implementation matrix. That is something that I didn't see at Bomas of Kenya. I don't know whether it was an anticlimax of sorts, when I probably would have expected that this is a report, it has been launched, this is how we intend to implement it. This is how it will be rolled out. Probably there will be another small team, probably of experts, that will come up maybe next week or thereabout, now to tell us who will implement what and at what point. Because at the end of the day, it is important to tell Kenyans what do they do with the recommendations, what do they do with the document, because the BBI report as is has no legs to find itself to Parliament, either chambers of Parliament, as was said by Speaker Justin Muturi of the National Assembly. So who will take it to the National Assembly? Who will take it to the Senate? Who will take it to the County Assembly? And what specific parts of the report will be taken to which house? I think it is important to have that implementation matrix. And lastly, the IEBC question. There's a proposal that political parties be involved in the selection of commissioners. Some say it's a good thing, some say it's a bad thing. The Deputy President says it's akin to asking players and teams to select a referee, and which teams will be involved in that process. I think ultimately, all these things that we're talking about boil down to a credible election. And that credible election can only be conducted by credible commissioners and credible returning officers, polling officers, and everybody else. So how we end up with an IEBC, an electoral commission, is as important as the persons that we come up with. If you have a process that is faulty, you will easily end up with a result that is faulty. So I think it is important to have a solid discussion around it. And in any way, whichever process is used, that the commissioners who will be selected are people who can be able to run an election whose outcome everybody will say, the winners and the losers will look and say, this one is okay, we can live with it.
Yeah, absolutely.